Hey, Jack, this is Uncle Si. Y'all are listening to the Blind Movie Podcast. Watch the Blind movie in theaters starting September 28th. Remember, if God can save my brother Phil, there's hope for all of us. Get your tickets today at theblindmovie.com. You gotta check out the next episode.
Welcome back to the podcast. We are here talking about the Blind movie, which we watched last night with our family for the very first time. My name is Zach Dasher, if you don't know. My mom was Jan in the movie, so this episode today we're going to talk about her influence in Phil's life and how she brought Phil to Christ through her ministry and through her love for him. So to do that, I've invited my immediate family here, along with Korie, one of our producers. I got my wife Jill here. Say hello, Jill.
Hello.
And my father, Gordon Dasher, is with us here today. Say hello, Gordon.
Hello.
Our dad. And my mom passed away a few years ago, so you're going to have to be the one to tell us a little bit about this story and her influence, and because you were there for a lot of this as well, correct?
I was, yeah.
So your memory is probably pretty good on this as well. What would you want people who watch The Blind, maybe this isn't shown in The Blind, what would you want them to know about my mom, your wife, your late wife, Jan?
Well, she was, the movie didn't really, somebody asked me last night, do you think that the movie captured Jan's personality? And I would say, I don't know how you capture that. She was quirky. I call her the female version of Phil. But I think what the movie did capture about her is that she was very passionate about her relationship with Christ, and that she was passionate about pursuing her brother for Christ. And there were a lot of people that she pursued like that, for Christ. So I think it captured that really well. I was in tears the whole time just looking at it, thinking about how amazing she was in that regard.
Yeah, Korie, you knew my mom well, so would you say, was there anything that we didn't capture? Because you were, like me, you were touching every part of this film.
Yeah.
Is there anything about her maybe we didn't capture?
Well, I think that, you said she was like Phil, but a little like Si, too. I mean, the quirkiness of Si,
Yeah.
would you say?
Yeah, she, I used to tell people I would wake up in the morning and she'd have the covers pulled up to here, and I thought it was Si for a brief moment. That was tough.
That's dramatic.
That scared me.
That's scary.
Like, oh, whoa.
No, she was so much fun and such a light. When she was in the room, you knew it. And also just really always preaching the word. Yeah. Like you would, if
Mostly
you were with her. Yeah, she would preach at you too. No, everybody. If you were with her for just even a moment, you got some like nugget of like godly truth. And I loved how she was just like, it just came out of her so powerfully. So yeah, she was really, really special. And then as we've mentioned before, I don't know how these podcasts are going to order, but we talked about how she saw that in Phil. Like she knew. She was the one to always say, like, if Phil becomes a Christian, then he's going to bring so many more to Christ. So she was prophetic, really. It's incredible.
She could approach you and be honest with you, even if what she was saying was not the most comfortable thing, you would still love her for being honest with you. I don't know. She just
Phil's got that too. It's like you can, and a lot of most of the family members had that. Yeah, I think about mom's role too in the family is that she had this interesting position where she could call out Phil or anybody, and they just kind of accepted it with her. When we did the podcast with the brothers, I mean, and Si was in that one as well. Everybody was like, "Yeah, I was afraid of Phil." I think my mom may have been the only one that wasn't afraid of. I don't think she was afraid of anybody, was she, Dad? You could probably answer that.
You want me to say she was afraid of me?
She wasn't afraid of you. I know that for a fact. Did she ever talk to you about her relationship with Phil and growing up inside? Kind of what was her dynamic with them?
Oh yeah. The one that with Si that stands out is that Si is the one that taught her about sex. And she said, Si said, he took her fishing and he said, I want to talk to you about something. All boys want sex. And she said, what? He said, that's what they're all after. And she said, not Bruce Lynn. And he said, even Bruce Lynn.
Wait, who's Bruce Lynn?
There's some guy that grew up with him.
Is this a character that's supposed to be in the film?
Yeah, if Bruce, if you're listening and you want to weigh in on that.
He's no longer alive, but yeah, she talked about him, and they were really super close. They were the two I think that were the closest. I mean, she was closer to Cy than anybody else. And with Phil, she just had a lot of admiration for how he fed the family, and he kind of took charge when Granny was sick, and yeah, he brought game home and fish and that kind of thing, and he protected her. They both did. They were very protective of Jan. She always believed in him, and she actually got me to go to the bar before Bill Smith. I hadn't been a Christian but 2 or 3 weeks, and she thought I could talk to him, and he basically intimidated the fire out of me and ran me off. I mean, he just ridiculed me to no end. I said, I'm never going back to that guy's bar, never.
So you actually, I forgot about that. That wasn't in the movie either. But so you were so first she went to you, and she, what did she say? Tell us about that.
She said, I want you to go with me to my brother's bar, and maybe you can talk to him about Christ. So 2 weeks before, I've been smoking weed and drinking and all kinds of stuff. And so I walked in, and the first thing he did, we found out I was from Florida. He goes, Florida, I mean, good grief, nothing good comes out of Florida. There's a lot of family dynamics for that. So I don't remember what he said. I just remember I left there with my tail between my legs. I mean, he intimidated me to death.
Were you scared of him? You
could admit physically?
You could admit it.
It's okay. This is a safe place.
Yeah, it's a safe place here.
Yeah, I was emotionally afraid of him, not physically. I could have taken him, but
No, you couldn't take
I could have taken him.
So, Mom, did she go in there with you?
Oh, yeah. But I mean, I just remember leaving with my tail, seriously. It was between my legs. I just was so intimidated. And I didn't see him again until after he became a Christian. I mean, we got married. He never came. He didn't come to our wedding, shock, but after we got married, then we kind of got to be friends. Then we weren't friends again for a while. I had a big argument with him and his brother Harold one night, and I told Jan, I'm never coming back to this place. But now, even though Jan's gone, I consider him one of my closest friends. We're very close, work together a lot.
This is Miss Kay.
And Uncle Si. Thanks for checking out the Blind Movie Podcast. When you see this movie, you'll know that redemption isn't out of reach for any of us. On the Blind, on digital today.
Visit theblindmovie.com.
So what did Mom tell you about why she went into the bar with Phil, with Bill? What was her, how did she present that?
Okay, actually something you said earlier was not accurate. She didn't say it would bring thousands. She said if we can just get him converted, he'll bring hundreds to the Lord. And later, before she got really sick and could have a conversation about it, she said, was I ever wrong? It's actually millions of people that have heard the gospel because of Phil. And so when she died, there were, I don't know how many you think there were there, 1,000? That place was pretty packed. And people would come up to me, women who had been in the sex trade or drug addiction or whatever, women that had been married multiple times, and we had tears in our eyes and said, if it hadn't been for Jan, I wouldn't be a believer today. She really either led me to the Lord or discipled me into my faith. And then guys would come up and say, if Jan hadn't led Phil to the Lord, I wouldn't be a believer because he converted me. Or Phil didn't lead me to the Lord, but somebody that he converted who converted somebody else. It was like 4 generations down.
Yeah.
This person 4 generations down because Jan had this passion to see her brother come to faith in Christ. So just like, it's like just all these fingers and all the way out like a spider web. It's amazing, to think about the impact that a very unassuming, humble woman, quirky,
I was thinking also about that scene. So it comes right after in the movie where Kay talks about you have to fight for your marriage. And then Jan comes in to the bar. And there's this one little moment where you see Jan and Kay connect, like their eyes connect. And I just feel like it's such a powerful moment of like strength of women to be like, hey, we're in this together. Like, I'm here for you. I'm here for you. I'm fighting for your marriage for you, with you. And Kay looks at Jan and is like, you're here,
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I feel like it's such a powerful moment where women can like come together and be like, hey, I'm here in it with you. I'm not giving up with you for your marriage. And I love that scene.
There was a lot of different people, that played a role that God had used to bring this story about. It wasn't really just about Phil. That's why I love how Cy talks about it. It's God's story. It's not really just Phil and Kay's story. It's not just about Phil repenting and Kay forgiving. It's about your granddad giving Kay a job. It's about Bill Smith giving them a place to stay. It's about Mom bringing him into the bar. It's all these other people that came around this story, and that's how God works. His sovereignty is that he's orchestrating these things out. And so I found that to be just incredibly powerful as I was watching it. So Dad, I was also going to ask you a question. I probably know the answer to this, but I mean, was Mom always just convinced about this thing with Phil that he would, that she seemed to have a pretty strong confidence in it. Did you ever see her waver in her confidence on what she thought Phil would do?
That he would lead people?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, from the first time that I met her, she told me about him. And she told me Terry Bradshaw was his backup quarterback. And I played dumb. I said, who's Terry Bradshaw? I acted like I never heard of him. And she was very convinced that he was a leader of people. Because he always had an entourage.
Yeah.
Even when he was at his worst, he always had a crowd of people following behind him. And he told me last night or yesterday afternoon that in junior high school and high school, he would go over to the smokers. But this may be hard for y'all to believe, but when we were in high school, they had a smokers circle outside, and people that smoke could go out and smoke cigarettes. So he would go over there, but he didn't smoke, but he went over there because he could lean up against the wall and tell stories. And he said, there'd be 30 or 40 guys standing around listening to me tell these stories. He said, I just made them up, stuff I made up. And then, of course, Cy later on tried to imitate that, and his are so ridiculous, but they're funny because they're outrageous. But she saw that in him, that he had this ability to just draw people into conversations.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even call it a conversation. Draw people into his monologue. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's more.
But he could paint a picture.
He could paint a word picture. People don't realize that if he's really crafty with language, and she knew that, he's a wordsmith that I highly respect him.
I have a question about Jan.
Yeah.
How did she come to faith? And did she just what did she say about her story? Did she just always believe, or was there a moment for her?
She was born saved.
You would think.
I think that because there was so much uncertainty in her life. I mean, she saw her mom, which was one of the hardest parts of the movie to watch for me, is to see Granny being hauled away in this ambulance. And the way she told it was that they would handcuff her behind her back, and then she would try to kick the windows out of the police cruiser. So they handcuffed her feet and then handcuffed those handcuffs to the ones behind her so she couldn't move. And she's 8 years old watching this unfold. And so I made the point to Korie earlier before we started that everything in her life, and Phil's and Cy's, was filtered through this experience of watching her mom have these manic episodes where there's a total break with reality, and seeing her mom hauled away to the mental hospital in, not Alexander, Pineville, yeah. So, I mean, that happened repeatedly, so I think that was there. They didn't have much money. They were sitting there one night watching TV, and there was a knock at the door, and Phil went to answer it, and Phil came back and said, Miss So-and-so wants to talk to you. So Paul said, what does she want? Phil said, she wants to adopt Jan. So he goes, what? So he goes and talks to the lady and told her, no, she's my daughter, we're gonna keep her. But people saw this, there was a lot of shame. She would get off the bus 2 houses down so people wouldn't know that was her house. So I think that this emptiness and emotional turmoil just drove her into the arms of Jesus. And she had a very personal relationship with God. I mean, when I first married her, we'd go to bed together, and she'd be praying, and she'd challenge God. Like, I was pastoring a church, I wasn't making much money. She said, God, you own the cattle on 1,000 hills. Why won't you do something about our finances? I moved over because I was totally unfamiliar with that kind of language, until I just started digging deeper into the Psalms and realized that's exactly how David talked to God.
She prayed the Psalms. I mean,
Yeah.
she prayed like a
Yeah.
psalmist.
It freaked me out. So I think that, like the C.S. Lewis quote, God speaks to us, whatever, but his pain is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world.
Yeah.
And I think that pain, I don't know, to answer your question, I don't know when.
She's gone on to be with the Lord, but we're able to honor her with this podcast too. And I just want to ask this question as we kind of wrap up here. I've thought about this a lot. I thought about it last night. What do y'all think? Everybody can answer because we all knew Mom. What do you think she would say if she could see this movie? What do you think Mom would say if she could see The Blind?
Well, I think she would bawl her eyes out through the entire thing.
Yeah.
I know that for sure. I think she would be, oh my word, I think she would be so proud of you and you, Korie, and just the family, telling the story. But she wouldn't, I don't know, she would just be so proud. I like to think that she's getting to see all this, in that great cloud of witnesses.
It was so special to get to be in that space with all of our kids and grandkids, and to just think about the legacy that they are getting to witness. And there's a lot of good parts of the legacy that they witness, and as we get to be together and have fun together and have dinner together, but to also see what God has brought us through the hard times that they get to witness, I think is really beautiful. So yeah, well, whenever you said that, I just gonna envision her the big smile on her face and eyes glistening and saying I knew it.
Yeah.
But it would be it's not bragging, I knew it, but I knew it. God told me that this was gonna happen. And just like a celebration, I knew God he had that.
Never doubted it.
That's
Never
right,
shocked.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think more than being proud of her own role in all this, I think she would be, of course she's proud of Phil, but she'd be proud of you. She would be so thrilled that she didn't ever get the limelight. She never sought it, ever. But to see her son doing what you're doing in the kingdom, and her daughter-in-law and her niece, in-law, this is family enterprise, just telling the story of Jesus and redemption that's played out in Phil's and Kay's life and all their sons. I think she would be overjoyed with it. Yeah.
Well, to reiterate what Si said, this is not just our family story. This is God's story. So some of you out there are maybe you're not Phil in this story. Maybe you're not the person that's in despair. Maybe you're not Kay with a broken marriage. Maybe you're that person like my mom who no one will ever hear about, unless they're hearing about it now. But I mean, she lived her life and never got to really be recognized for just the incredible work that she did early on. Maybe you're that person. So I want to encourage you, push in and listen to the voice of the Holy Spirit. If He's moving you to share your faith with somebody or to pursue someone that you love for the Lord, go do that and be like my mom was. It's kind of cool that we're able to sit here and tell these stories now. It's a little bit obviously emotional, but it's surreal, and it makes me thankful for a God who is gracious, who has lavishly poured out His grace on us through the blood of His Son, Jesus. So thank y'all again, and go see The Blind movie, blindmovie.com. Thank you guys.